Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, a podcast about the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you are a nature-loving therapist who works with children, this podcast will help you start taking your work outdoors into nature and help you grow a profitable nature-based therapy practice or program that connects children to nature and changes their lives and yours forever. I'm your host, the ever honest, always 100% real, Laura Park Figueroa. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for over 20 years. But 7 years ago, I almost left the field entirely. I was so burned out. And nature-based therapy is what saved me. It reignited my love of my work, and I saw profound changes in the children that I was working with. I'm the founder of Outdoor Kids OT and the creator of the Contigo approach, an evidence-based framework for nature-based pediatric therapy services. I've helped dozens of pediatric therapists start and grow successful nature-based practices through my business coaching and online programs. The latest of which is the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community, TIGO for short. TIGO is an online membership site with loads of resources to support you every step of the way as you start and grow your nature-based therapy work. You can find out more at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. Working outdoors with children can be a wild ride. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's jump in. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Therapy in the Great Outdoors. This is episode 15 of the podcast. I'm so glad you've joined me today, and this is going to be a 10-minute takeaway episode on one of my favorite studies ever. And unfortunately, it is not available online. The last time I looked, I didn't look today because I already had it printed from a long time ago. But it's not available online, so you may have to pay to access it or find a friend who is a student or have a fieldwork student in your practice and have them look it up for you. It is called the best title ever. Forest School is Muddy, and I Like It. Perspectives of Young Children with Autism Spectrum Disorders, Their Parents, and Educational Professionals. This is by Catherine Bradley and Dawn Mail. It's from 2017, so it's a little bit older than some of the articles I've been doing lately, but it is such a beautifully written and lovely study that has loads of quotes in it that are so sweet. It was a very small scale study. So this was an exploratory study to look at the views of young children with ASD, parents, and educational professionals about their forest school experience. So it only had 4 children, 3 parents, because 2 of the children were twins. So it was 3 mothers who they interviewed, and 2 educational professionals. All of the children were autistic. I should say a word about person-first language because the title of this article uses person-first language, saying young children with autism. And nowadays, if you didn't know this, I think many people are starting to understand this and listen to autistic voices and know that many in the autistic community want us to just say autistic children or autistic people to neutralize the experience of being autistic, that it's not a bad thing to be autistic. It's like being black or brown or white, whatever you are, whatever color you are, right? It's not something that is bad. It's just a trait, right? So I may bounce back and forth because the language in this article actually, the way it was written, this was 6 years, what are we in, 2022? So this was 5 years ago. It probably was submitted for publication 6 or 7 years ago with how slow it takes to publish things. So I may flip back and forth, just giving that caveat before I dive into describing the article, because the language in the article is using person-first language, which if you're like me and graduated from OT school 22 years ago, then you would be thinking you're supposed to say child with autism. And now what is more desirable is that we say autistic child. So you may hear me flip back and forth. Okay, so this article, as I was saying before the caveat, was a very small scale study. So very small, only 4 kids, right? But the information in the article is so beautiful and fun. And it is the design of this study that I want us to think about as well when we talk about this. So, fun fact to start is that this article says the first forest school was established in the US in Wisconsin in 1927 and was based on a concept developed by the then dean of the College of Agriculture at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. And I live in Madison. So this is so cool and a little fact that I want to look at. That's in the intro to the article. And then they kind of talk about the history and how it's all throughout the world and in Denmark and England and how it's growing. Okay, so what they did in this study was they took 4 children who were diagnosed with autism and they gave them a forest school experience. I believe it was once a week. I didn't put this in my notes. Once a week, 3 sessions of forest school education over the course of a 2-week rolling program. So they participated in 75. It says over the course of the academic year, the children participated in the current study experienced around 75 hours of forest school education. So they went outdoors to the same area like a forest school model would use, right? They do mention at the beginning of the article that there are no study to date of this article in 2017. There are no studies focusing on implementation of forest school education in special schools for like special education. And the beautiful thing about this article, they note, is that the voices of children in the mainstream literature are virtually unheard. So in this article, in this study, they wanted to specifically include the voices of the children, and you will see how they did that in just a moment. So they had 4 children, as I said. The way that they structured this interview was to do semi-structured interviews with the educational professionals and the mothers that participated. With the children, the way that they accumulated data was by taking field notes while they were in the forest school setting. But the coolest thing they did was to take video footage of the children over a 4-week period. And from these videos, they focused on each individual child for different parts of the filming, right? And then after they had all this video footage, they created 10-minute videos for each child, like their own little forest school movie. And they write here that they did make efforts to ensure that the edited videos represented the full range of activities experienced by the children. The highs, for example, being with their friends, and the lows, for example, encountering dogs, if a child was scared of a dog. For some kids, that could be a super positive thing. So then what they did after they had this edited movie, which showed the highs and lows for each child that focused on them and their activities in the forest school, they had the children watch this 10-minute movie of themselves. And while the child watched the movie, they took notes on the comments the children made, their facial expressions. The children were given full, you should really get a hold of this article. I wish I could show you how awesome it is and how they like really center the voices of the children in this article. They say that they showed the children how to work the machine, to go back and forth, to rewind the video if they wanted to watch it different times. They also showed them the recording device that they were using and allowed them to see it and play with it so that they were familiar with it when they recorded their voices. They made field notes of any nonverbal communication that the child had during watching the video. Oh, and then they also presented questions with visual prompts while the kids were watching the video and recorded their responses to those questions. Not only did they do that, though, but after a 2-week period, they went back and asked the children the interview questions again using a visual format. So I'm assuming that means like using pictures or visuals. They were shown questions and then allowed to draw, and they were invited to draw. All 4 of the children said yes, they wanted to draw. So they drew their response. And so this was a way that the authors tried to get multiple sets of data from the children so that they could then corroborate the data, right? They could try to like see if the children's responses 2 weeks later were the same as the responses that they gave when they were watching the video of themselves or similar to. Their analysis of the data, this was a qualitative study, obviously. They didn't take like numerical data like in a quantitative approach. So the way that they analyzed the data was to look at similarities and differences and to come up with themes in the interviews with the parents and professionals, as well as themes that the children identified in their responses to things. So the findings were that the themes for the I'm gonna go out of order in the way that they present it in the article, because I think the children's responses are the most interesting. So I am actually going to start with the responses of the mothers and then the educators, and then circle back to the children's perspective. So the mothers and the educators' perspectives were very similar. The three same themes were identified, as well as some sub-themes underneath each of these. But basically, the mothers and the educators agreed that the forest school experience centered around and offered opportunities for the children in the themes of experiencing success, learning outcomes, they called it, but essentially it's learning about nature, learning about scientific things, like just kind of came up naturally during forest school. And then challenge and risk taking was the third theme. So if you've worked outside with children, I bet you will agree with those. I have heard this in my own research. I can think of one particular interview where a person I was interviewing was just really reflecting on how the outdoor environment, how nature actually allows kids who typically aren't as successful in indoor settings like our typical educational models, but the outdoor environment really allows them to shine. It really allows them to be themselves and experience success in a way that indoor settings may kind of try to put them in a box, but an outdoor setting is much more outside the box and open-ended, and just allows them to move their body and really experience success in a way that they weren't experiencing in an indoor classroom at school, and how that can be so beneficial for a child's self-esteem and their self-concept and their confidence in the world. And our hope would be that internal change happens, right? And then the child goes into the classroom and can experience some success because they're having that positive experience being outdoors. But that was not in this research. That's just my reflection on interviews that I've had for my research, which is not published yet. So those were the main themes. And I want to read you a few quotes. So one of the mothers said, "I've noticed that he's more tolerant now. He doesn't care if he gets messy. He doesn't care if his shoe is messy, and he knows we will clean it. He's a bit more relaxed." So I thought that was a really cool quote. And then the other one is they're talking about their children being more aware of the environment. And the mother said, the researcher asked, "So is he more aware of the environment?" Which I would kind of say is a leading question a little bit. But the mother said, "Yes, much more. Before, he would only go outside for the trampoline, nothing more." So the mother was saying how her son was collecting shells in the garden. It was the first time that she'd ever seen him outdoors, leaning down, trying to pick them up and arrange the shells. So that's a cool one. And then the challenge and risk taking was a theme that both the educators and the mothers stated. And one of the teacher assistants said, "It's difficult exposing children to risk. You need to take a step back and assess the risk that they're being exposed to. And it is a case of judgment sometimes. I suppose it's quite difficult knowing how much to push the boundaries, but as long as you stay close to the child and know that child, you understand how far they will stretch the boundaries. And it's different for every child." So really great reflection there about knowing the child, being connected, right? That's part of my whole approach to outdoor therapy. It's the first theme of the Contigo approach, the connection and transformation in the great outdoors approach. So this teacher's aide really seemed connected, right, to this child, and really being observant and noticing and pushing the child when it was safe to, but also allowing the child to experience risk. So with learning outcomes, they specifically, both mothers and the teachers expressed problem solving, a connection to nature, being more interested in nature, more initiative, like finding activities by themselves and being more independent. So those were some of the learning outcomes. Let's go back to the children now. I'm going to flip back in the article to the children, because that is where the fabulous title of this article comes from. "Forest School is Muddy and I Like It." A child actually wrote that on their drawing. So the children's perspectives were a little bit different than the mothers and the teachers. So the three main themes that were identified from the children were friends, challenge and risk-taking, and learning outcomes. So friends was the one that was not present in the parents' and educators, but the other two were similar: challenge and risk taking and learning outcomes. So the sweetest thing that they wrote about was that the challenge and risk taking piece. So one of the kids, his name was Jamil, was watching his forest school movie, and it said below, Jamil watches his forest school movie and expresses surprise at his adventurous behavior. And then it's a quote: Jamil, "I'm climbing. Oh my God, I am really climbing." And then the author state, he also appears to experience pride at overcoming challenges. Jamil, "Oh my God, look how far away I am. Is that really me? Yes, that is. Let's watch again." And the researcher says, "Does it scare you being so far away?" And Jamil says, "No, it's only a bridge. I'm not scared of the dark." So it's so interesting, right? I just love the quotes. That's what I want to put those in my research is qualitative as well. So I'm really excited to hopefully share some really rich quotes from the therapists that I interviewed whenever I publish. Gosh, it feels so crazy to even say that. I feel so far away. Yeah. I should be working on my research right now, and I'm recording a podcast episode. Maybe I'm procrastinating. So really sweet quotes here about the friendships, about the risk taking, and about learning outcomes. So one of the things that the children said, the researcher asked, "What is your favorite part of forest school?" And the child said, "Running." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "I like to run and get muddy." And then later she said, "What gets muddy?" He said, "My welly boots." She said, "Anything else?" He said, "Sometimes trousers. I do not like this." And then the researcher says, "Why?" He said, "I do not like mud on my trousers." But despite saying he doesn't like mud on his trousers, he actually drew a picture, and the caption he wrote on the picture, "Forest school is muddy and I like it." So he's the same kid who said he didn't like mud on his clothing is the kid who said he liked mud and gave the title to this article. So I thought it was very sweet. The children who, when they were invited to draw a picture to show how they made them feel, they frequently drew pictures of excitement and happiness and positive emotions around the forest school experience. So I think you can really see the takeaways from this article fairly clearly, but I really think that there are some takeaways for us in our nature-based work that are interesting. So one of those is that this is something that I haven't really thought about before I had read this article. I read this article a few years ago, actually, in my literature that I reviewed for my PhD, but haven't done a podcast episode on it yet. So here it is. So one thing I think we might think about is like, could we use videos as a strategy in our treatment sessions for children to really, truly see the challenges that they are overcoming in a treatment session? I mean, I imagine that it could be really powerful for kids to watch themselves climbing a tree from the perspective of the person that is on the ground. Or it could be really powerful for children to watch themselves go on the rocks over a stream, or to watch themselves build a fort or something like that, where it's something that's hard maybe, or go in a swing. I did a early child that I saw really early when I started doing nature-based work about 7 years ago. He loved to ask me to record him so that we could show his mom. And so that was very motivating to him. And he was motivated by doing whatever the challenging thing was so that he could show his mom later. So think about using videos as a strategy in your treatment sessions with children, and specifically with children who are autistic, like this article had for the people that participated in the research, because I think kids that are autistic need that visual, right? They're visual learners generally. And so it is a really cool thing to think about doing that we can pull from this study and the unique design that they used in this study. The other things are that risk-taking should simply be a part of all nature-based sessions, obviously. We need to keep a close eye. We need to make sure kids are safe, but we should absolutely be allowing risk-taking. That is part of what kids like. Kids like getting messy. We should allow getting messy. I think I'm preaching to the choir. I know by pulling all this stuff out of the research, I'm just reiterating that what you all are doing out there with children and getting messy and doing risky things that are not dangerous, but risky is supported by research. You could say that this article supports that practice, right? And another takeaway is that part of offering nature-based therapy sessions is that the experience of running sessions outdoors, if you do groups, allows children opportunities to make friends in a smaller space that is a calming space, that is a supportive space, that is a positive and safe space. And so one of the things that really makes me sad is that a lot of the kids that, at least in my practice, a lot of the kids that come to my practice, they just have a really hard time making friends, and they may feel lonely. I don't know that we can speak for children, but I do think that growing up is just hard. And when you don't have friends, you're feeling lonely, right? And I don't want that for any kid. None of us do. And so I think giving them those opportunities to make friends in group sessions is a really cool thing to offer too. The last thing that I will say is a limitation of this study that they said is that one of the authors was a teacher in the classroom of these children. So that is something, it's a limitation because, she said she tried to control for her bias and all of that, but it always is a limitation. Like a limitation of my research will be that I offer a course online that a little under half the people who participated in my study had taken that course. So that's a limitation, right? Because it may bias the research a little bit, and you just have to honor that that's the limitation. So this researcher was a special education teacher who published this article, and she was the teacher in the classroom of these children. But man, more power to her. This article was just really what the design of the study was just very well crafted, even though it was a teeny tiny study. And as always, they recommend that we need larger scale research that actually centers the voices of children and lets children give their opinions. So that was fodder for me in thinking about maybe future research that I might do. So that's it, y'all. Forest school is muddy and I like it. We could say forest therapy is muddy and I like it. I hope you're having a wonderful week. Come on over to the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community if you have thoughts on this article and share your thoughts. I would love to hear them, and I'll see you there. Bye. Thank you so much for spending time with me today exploring therapy in the great outdoors. If you liked what you heard in this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so we can share the magic of nature-based therapy with a wider audience of therapists who work with children who desperately need connection to nature nowadays, just like we do. If you're ready to take the next step in this adventure, join our free Therapy in the Great Outdoors community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. The TIGO community is a private space just for nature-based pediatric practitioners. We have loads of resources there to support you as you start or grow a nature-based practice or program. Our free TIGO community has a discussion forum, a jobs and volunteers board, a crowdsourced treatment activities section, as well as free video trainings, research article reviews, and book recommendations from yours truly. Head on over to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to join today. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy the business and practice of therapy in the great outdoors.